In 1981, a new edition of the original Halloween surfaced on television, and it has been forever known as Halloween: The Extended Cut. But what's in this version, and does it make the movie better? Hey, what's up everybody? Nick here, and today I want to talk to you guys about Halloween: The Extended Edition, or as some call it, Halloween: The Television Cut. But before we get into what's different between this cut and the theatrical cut, how did this thing come to be in the first place? Well, back in 1980, NBC purchased the television rights to Halloween 1978. And after going back and forth with John Carpenter and Deborah Hill about censoring the film, John Carpenter agreed to go back and shoot 12 minutes of additional footage to fill the 2-hour time slot that NBC was going to have when it premiered on television. And John Carpenter actually shot these new scenes while production was underway for Halloween 2, so it made it a lot easier to get everybody together. Now, this wasn't exactly uncommon back in the 80s. In the 80s, you'd see television cuts or edited cuts of a bunch of these horror movies. A lot of time just to censor things so they could air it on television, but sometimes to pad the runtime so it would fit a time slot. That's what happened here with Halloween. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I am often weary about extended editions or director's cuts a lot of the time. Simply just because I feel like the more you add to something, the more it can really mess with the pacing and take away from a tighter story. So I was weary going into the TV cut of Halloween. But what do we get here that's different than the theatrical? So the first added scene we get is Dr. Loomis meeting with the board at Smith's Grove, where they're talking about how he's not going to be transferred. And you've got Donald Pleasance pleading with them to reconsider this because he feels they don't have the security or the measures in place to adequately keep Michael Myers locked up and off the streets. Now, of course, they're skeptical of this and they don't listen to a word he says. This is a really, really good scene, and I actually think having this scene in the theatrical cut would have helped the movie. Now, of course, it's a moot point because it was shot 3 years later, but still, I think that this scene really adds a lot because, one, you have a great performance by Donald Pleasance in this moment, pleading with the board. You don't understand. You don't understand what you have here incarcerated. I have never met a patient like this. And these guys are just whatever, lackadaisical, who cares? I think it really helps to add to the air of menace of Michael Myers and how Dr. Loomis knew from the very beginning that this guy was incredibly dangerous and everybody was underestimating him. Even when he was a little boy, Dr. Loomis was like, y'all can't let this dude stay here. He's gonna get out. So I love this scene. Now, following that scene, we have Dr. Loomis walking to Michael Myers' room, where a child Michael Myers is looking out the window, not saying anything, not moving, doesn't even look in Loomis's direction. And it's like a minute of silence in this scene before anything is said, with Loomis just sitting there, staring at Michael as Michael is staring out the window, not seeing the wall, looking past the wall, looking at this night inhumanly patient. And you get a really great moment from Dr. Loomis here where he says, "You fooled them, haven't you, Michael? But not me." I really like this scene. I don't think this scene takes away from anything. If anything, it is just a physical representation of what Loomis speaks about later in the movie, how Michael Myers was looking past this window, this wall. He was waiting for his moment to break out. I think having this only helps. Michael doesn't talk. It doesn't really take any of the mystique away from the character whatsoever. So far, we're 2 for 2. Now, basically, this was an extended part of that earlier scene I mentioned, but it does feel like 2 very separate scenes, and I love them. The next bit of added footage is a scene where Dr. Loomis is inspecting Michael Myers' room the morning after he broke out and went on his rampage to Haddonfield. Now, this scene is totally unnecessary. The moment that we get in the theatrical cut with Dr. Wynn is more than enough. That less than a minute exchange between Dr. Loomis and Dr. Wynn is all we needed. We didn't need any more of that. So getting this scene added in there where Loomis is looking around Michael's room and it's been destroyed and everything's been turned over and ripped and glass has been broken, I don't know. It's almost to make Michael look like animalistic, but Michael's always been animalistic in just how he carries himself, how he stalks, how primal he is. This wasn't necessary. This literally looked like you had just put a monkey in a cage and the monkey got pissed off and was just trying to break out. If anything, I think it just kind of takes some of the mystique away, and I don't think it's necessary. But the worst part of this scene is when the nurse closes the door to show Loomis that on the back of the door, Michael had written the word sister. Okay, look. You can explain this a lot of ways, and you could say, oh, well, it works in this movie because he could have been talking about Judith since we didn't know that Laurie was his sister yet. No, because this movie released on October 30th, 1981 on NBC, the original Halloween extended edition. It was coinciding with Halloween 2. So they clearly put it in there as a tease to be like, oh, Laurie's his sister. Oh yeah, we just learned that in Halloween 2. He knew he had a sister. Now you could definitely make the argument, no, it's just about Judith. But obviously that's not what the filmmakers were intending, even though you can read it that way. And I just don't like any mention or any inference of a sister relationship in the original Halloween. Even if this was filmed back to back with Halloween 2. I just don't think that it needs to be in that movie because that was never the initial conceit at all. It's never alluded to in that film. And if anything, it takes away from the randomness of Michael Myers' rampage on that night in 1978. So why don't we just wait till Halloween 2 before we get that revelation? Because clearly that was not the plan from the beginning. I just don't like it. It also just comes across kind of corny and cheesy. I just don't like anything about this scene. And then the last scene of additional footage we get is just a moment between the girls. Now this was Deborah Hill's strong suit and her largest contribution to the original Halloween. She really developed these characters. She wrote them, she wrote their dialogue, she knew what she wanted to see from these three girls. So Deborah got to shine a little bit again here. You've got Laurie presumably fresh out of the shower, which is why she has a towel on her head, but let's be honest, it was because she didn't have the same haircut and they were shooting Halloween 2 where she had that incredible wig, so they kind of just tried to conceal her hair for continuity purposes. Linda shows up at her house and is talking about how that creep in the station wagon was following her again. Linda's asking to borrow a blouse of Laurie's, and then Annie calls and the three of them have a little back and forth before Linda goes upstairs to get the blouse and Laurie sings "I Wish I Had You All Alone." And that's the end of that scene. Now, this is one of those scenes where it's a mixed bag because the three of these girls had really good chemistry. I always liked their interactions, and it feels like all three of them stepped right back into the role from 1978. However, it's just a totally unnecessary scene, and if anything, it just bogs the movie down. This is a perfect example of a filler scene, and that was quite literally the point of shooting these scenes, but up to this point, I'd say most of them had added enough to the movie where it was like, okay, I can dig this. But this is the one where it's really just kind of like, oh, so we just needed more runtime, huh? Nothing happens here of note at all. The things they talk about are things that had already been discussed at this point in the movie, so it's nothing new to anybody watching. It's just an unnecessary scene. While I like their camaraderie, it really bogs the movie down and it messes with the pacing. So going over the added footage for the extended cut, what's the verdict here? While some of this footage is actually really good, specifically the stuff with Loomis and young Michael, everything else is just kind of unnecessary. It truly is filler. And at the end of the day, when you watch the extended cut front to back, you will notice some pacing problems. Because John Carpenter had a very nice, concise 90-minute film with the original Halloween. It was very well paced. It said what it needed to say. It did what it needed to do. There was enough character development, enough scares. It was just a nice, tight 90-minute film. There are things to like about the extended cut, and the fact that it exists in the first place is really cool, because it wasn't until the 2000s where we actually got to see this cut on physical media. You would have had to have grown up in the 80s and watched this on NBC to have seen the extended cut. I remember being a kid and reading about this on the forums and people talking about, oh, do you remember there was this scene, there was this scene, and I was like, what are you talking about? So it was really cool when this came out on DVD and on VHS and I could watch it. I dig this thing. I dig that it exists, and I think it is a moment in Halloween history. I also think it's just really cool that they shot it during production for Halloween 2. But the overall verdict is, no, it's not superior to the theatrical cut of the film. It adds some cool stuff, but it adds a lot of unnecessary stuff too, and at the end of the day, it just makes this movie a little bit too long. It overstays its welcome, and it doesn't give you enough to chew on with this added stuff. But as I said, I think it's really cool that this thing exists and that we are able to watch this at home now. But I want to hear down below what you guys think. What are your thoughts on the extended edition of the original Halloween? Is there anybody that actually prefers it to the theatrical cut? Are you someone that grew up in the 80s and have memories of watching this cut on TV and wondering if this was ever going to come out on home video so you could watch it again? Whatever it is, sound off in the comment section down below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching the video. Please leave a like on it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. This is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I'm pulling out.